Now, a musician's story of how while he was away, Big Brother played on his drum set. So he switched instruments and became one of the top guitarists in rock history. This is the story of Eddie Van Halen. Now, Eddie says that when he first got into rock music, he didn't want to play guitar, he wanted to play drums. He told Guitar Player magazine that when he was about 12 years old, he heard this record. The surf classic Wipeout, a regular drum festival. It made Eddie Van Halen want to go out and buy the record and then get his own drums. He says, quote, I bought a $125 St. George drum set. I got a paper route to pay for it. And I'm out throwing the paper 5 in the morning in the rain with a bicycle with a flat tire, while my older brother Alex is supposed to be taking flamenco guitar lessons. Instead, he's playing my drums. Eventually, he got better than me. He could play Wipeout, and I couldn't. Finally, I said, you keep the drums, I'll play guitar. End of quote. Well, the instrumental switch of the Van Halen brothers was the start of something big. Today, Eddie's considered one of the best guitarists around, and Alex is one bad drummer. Here they are with bass player Michael Anthony and singer and guitarist Sammy Hagar. Van Halen at number 27 with Love Walks In.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
I'm Casey Kasem on Casey's Top 40. Well, now we're up to the current hit for a hard rock band whose two founders, Eddie and Alex, spent years studying to become classical pianists. Eddie and Alex Van Halen were born and raised in the small town of Nijmegen, Holland. It was a quiet town where young boys were expected to be well-behaved, and it was there that the well-behaved Van Halen brothers first began to play musical instruments. Their well-intentioned parents sent them for classical piano lessons, and good lads that they were, the Van Halens regularly attended their lessons and practiced at home. They showed talent and had dreams of becoming classical pianists, and then something happened that changed their lives forever. For business reasons, Eddie and Alex's parents decided to move to America, to Pasadena, California. And all of a sudden, after a decade of living in a small town in Holland, the brothers found themselves in a city on the edge of Los Angeles, right next to one of the hottest rock and roll scenes in the world. That's when their piano lessons started to seem very unimportant to them. They started studying rock and roll guitar and drums instead. And by the time they were in their late teens, they were playing with a couple of guys named David Lee Roth and Michael Anthony in bands with names like the Red Ball Jets, the Broken Combs, Mammoth, and then the band Van Halen. These days, the brothers who came this close to being concert pianists are playing survey song number 26 on Casey's Top 40. Here are Eddie and Alex Van Halen, along with their band Van Halen and Top of the World.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, falling 13 notches to number 39 is Van Halen, a band whose members are spreading out. Lead guitarist Eddie Van Halen recently designed a new guitar and amp, while lead singer Sammy Hagar designed his own clothing line.
Music. Well, after Eddie Van Halen commented in a recent interview that songwriting wasn't as difficult as brain surgery, Dr. James Schumacher offered Eddie a day's instruction in neurosurgery in return for a guitar lesson. When asked if he thought Eddie might have a flair for brain surgery, Dr. Schumacher quipped, "It will be difficult for him to learn everything in one day, but we will do our best." A recent stay at a Highline Boston hotel really bugged Eddie Van Halen. It seems Eddie was awakened from a sound sleep when a beetle crawled in his ear. Oh, the bug got so far in, a doctor had to be called in the middle of the night to get it out. Eddie pulled through fine, and the tour continued without any further incident. As for the beetle, well, let's just say that he won't be bothering any other hotel guests.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm David Perry for Casey Kasem. Once a week on Casey's Top 40, and you know how your favorite songs are doing on the national pop chart. Over the years, we've heard about a lot of crazy things that stars have demanded from concert promoters as a part of their performance contract. And those things often range from the excessive to the totally ridiculous. One of the most famous contract demands of all time was the one Van Halen was famous for. In their dressing rooms at every single gig, they wanted 50 pounds of M&Ms in every color, except for brown.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem, and moving up 2 notches to number 7 on Casey's Top 40 is Van Halen, a band whose lead guitarist Eddie Van Halen says his work and his life are in a lot better shape now that he's stopped his excessive drinking. Eddie says everything's more in balance, which coincidentally is the title of Van Halen's latest CD.
Count them down with Casey Kasem.
Well, now we're up to Van Halen, a band led by a guitar legend who for years was famous for his long rock and roll hair. Now he's famous for his short hair. For almost 20 years, Eddie Van Halen has been the very essence of the hard rock look, from his tight-fitting leather pants to his long flowing hair. But that long hair is a thing of the past, because one night earlier this year, Eddie shaved his hair down to a crew cut, and a short crew cut at that. Eddie says he was going through a really rough time. After the death of Van Halen's longtime manager, Ed Loeffler, the group had decided to manage themselves. And as it happened throughout much of the band's history, most of the burden for the decisions landed on Eddie. He says, quote, "I was going nuts, dealing with all the calls Ed Loeffler must have gotten that we never heard about," unquote. What's more, the band was trying to finish their new album. They were putting together a tour. They were dealing with videos. And the pressure on Eddie just kept on piling up. One day he was sitting around with a friend, and suddenly on an impulse, he excused himself and went to the bathroom. Then he stared into the mirror, picked up his electric razor, and slowly raised it to his head. Then, without a moment's thought, he started cutting his long flowing hair, and he didn't stop until the whole floor was covered with hair, and his head was almost shaved bald. Why did he do it? Well, Eddie says, quote, "I was so frustrated by everything that I just didn't know what else to do," unquote. Well, these days, Eddie may not be making lots of trips to the hairstylist, but Eddie and his band are still making trips to the top 10.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. And falling 2 notches to number 39 on Casey's Top 40, here's the veteran rock band Van Halen. Guitarist Eddie Van Halen says he doesn't mind being called a rock dinosaur by today's younger alternative rock bands. Quote, "Hey, dinosaurs are great. Dinosaurs are huge, right?" Unquote. This is a huge hit the huge band Van Halen recently took to the top 10. Can't Stop Loving You.
Casey's Coast to Coast.